Okay, good evening, everyone. How many of you here tonight have never been to a Fusatsu ceremony before? Okay. And online, is there anyone who hasn't been in one of these ceremonies before? I want to welcome everyone tonight who's here in person and online, and it's a special treat to see Dharma Joy with us this evening. Thank you for joining us. Very good. So, welcome. This is the first Fusatsu or Atonement ceremony that we're doing this year. And what a year it's been already. It feels like it's been going on forever. Just yesterday, I had this memory of what it was like when Trump was president last time, and it was like an assault every day of news, and it was just so exhausting. And it's only been 10 days, and I'm already feeling exhaustion again. The thing that really struck me 10 days ago, the 20th of January, was on that same day, we were commemorating and honoring Dr. Martin Luther King and witnessing Donald Trump assume the presidency of the United States for the second time. What a contradiction that is. How do we get our heads around something like that? I mean, I wrote a post to the group, and I said that as individuals, as leaders, as symbols, they seem to be completely opposite. They seem to be in worlds apart. Their values, their visions completely diverge. There you have it. They represent two radically different traditions in US history. Maybe you could say liberal and conservative traditions, or maybe you could say revolutionary and counter-revolutionary traditions. It's a huge contradiction, and the political and public field right now is just so not only tumultuous, but it's so divided and so polarized. It seems like duality is the order of the day. The discourse and the actions are so dualistic in their character. And yet, our Buddhist teachings suggest that, in fact, the world is non-dual, and it's possible to practice from a place of non-duality. And so I think what I wanted to bring up tonight is that question. Is it possible? How is it possible to grasp what's going on and engage with what's going on in a time of such dualistic thinking and action from a place of non-duality? I think that is the great koan that we have before us. The Buddhist teaching suggests it's possible. I personally don't think it seems easy. I don't have any magical fix that I know of. But I think that this Fusatsu ceremony that we are doing tonight actually gives us some resources that we can use to do this. So we start out with the verse of repentance. All evil karma ever committed by me since of old, on account of my beginningless greed, anger, and ignorance, born of my body, mouth, and thought, now I atone for it all. All evil karma, meaning all of the actions that we take that cause harm, create suffering. And they come from, according to the teachings, from the three poisons of greed, anger, and ignorance. So greed is our grasping for what we want, what we like. Anger is our rejection of what we don't like and don't want. And it's striking, it seems to me, and I don't know that I'm being unfair here, but it seems like Donald Trump has kind of made a brand out of anger and greed. So, I mean, even people who like Donald Trump would agree about the anger part. I don't know if they would really disagree with the greed. Many people voted for Donald Trump without liking the man particularly, but he seems to represent in some ways those two tendencies. Ignorance is fundamentally the attachment to the idea that we have an identity or we have a self that is fixed and independent of everyone and everything else. That is the basis for self-interest and self-centered conduct. And from the Buddhist teachings, that's an illusion because our selves are constantly changing and totally interdependent with everyone and everything else. So how do we work with the three poisons that give rise to the evil karma? What this ceremony is telling us is that we have to atone. And to atone is to be at one with all of that evil karma and all of those poisons. If the fundamental teaching that we are not separate is true, that means we're not separate from all evil karma. We're not separate from the three poisons. And we need to, we need to be able to see greed, anger, and ignorance in ourselves, individually as well as collectively. And if we do that, it's actually quite humbling. And because it takes us to the realization that we're not separate from Donald Trump as the symbol of those things. In fact, we are completely one with Donald Trump. We are Donald Trump, and Donald Trump is us. So how do we do this atoning? It's not an intellectual exercise. We do it by dropping our illusions, dropping our prejudices, dropping all of our ideas, and just seeing what's happening right now, being totally present right now. And then we are no longer separate. That is atoning. And in this ceremony, we do that with a lot of bowing and chanting. It's very practical, actually. The second part of the ceremony is where we invoke all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. The Buddhas before Shakyamuni, the historical Buddha. The Bodhisattvas Manjusri, Samantabhadra, Avalokiteshvara, the future Buddha, Maitreya, all successive ancestors, Buddhas. So just as if we take seriously the teaching of non-separation, we're not separate from all evil karma, neither are we separate from all of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And so this is what we realize and experience in this part of the ceremony. On the 20th of January, when I was thinking about, here we go, we're just starting this whole time, this is day one, this is the morning of this whole period, I thought about our work gatha, which is the way we begin every morning after our meditation and work gatha. We devote the merit of our sitting and our chanting, and we direct our energy forward, ahead. And we say, may our daily work be a source of practice, awareness, and compassion. And these are the qualities of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Awareness we can associate with the Bodhisattva Manjusri, the Bodhisattva of wisdom, who cuts away all of the delusions like this. Manjusri on our altar. Manjusri has a blade and sas, cuts right through the illusions of the self, and all of the prejudices, all of the constructions of the mind. Compassion is symbolized by the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, who hears the cries of the world, sees them, sees the suffering of the world with her many eyes, and responds to it with her many arms and hands and tools and resources. In practice, we might associate with Samantabhadra, who rides a great elephant and has this great power of vow and power to serve. So Shinryu Roshi would talk about these bodhisattvas as archetypes. We could think of them as aspects of the enlightened mind, and they arise naturally, not through some artificial exercise, but they arise naturally when we drop our illusions and attachments and are just fully present right now to what's happening. So I think that, speaking of archetypes, if Donald Trump in some ways is an archetype, Dr. Martin Luther King is also an archetype. Both Trump and King were and are complicated individuals with many different facets, and yet aspects of them lend themselves to these symbolic connotations. And Reverend King has that bodhisattva aspect because he was so committed and so eloquent in his struggle and in his teachings about morality and spirituality, about social justice and about love. He was so committed to these principles that he was willing to face intense harassment, violence, and ultimately gave his life. That's a bodhisattva symbol right there for us. It would seem like the precept that I'm talking about tonight is the seventh precept. The seventh grave precept, bodhisattva precept, is not putting others down to elevate the self. Not trying to dominate and subjugate, but to come from a place of equality, a place of non-separation in which all creatures are equal in the Dharma. And so I think not adopting a self-righteous position in this very fraught political landscape which we're in is very important and in line with this 7th precept. But I'm also thinking about the 8th grave precept here. When we had our last Fusatsu, we were on retreat, and Fugan Sensei gave a talk, precepts talk. He was referring to Dogen's instructions to the cook, but he brought up the 8th grave precept, and I thought it was so perceptive, because the 8th grave precept is not being stingy, and not hoarding, not sparing the resources and assets that one has. It's essentially a precept of generosity and giving. And above all, it's not sparing the Dharma assets. And what are the Dharma assets? Well, tonight we've been thinking about them as practice, awareness, and compassion. These qualities that arise completely naturally when we drop our attachments and illusions and are really here now and respond naturally to causes and conditions. So, how can we engage in this completely dualistic public setting from a non-dualist position? Dr. King talked about the struggle for social justice and love. And love is a word that you don't hear all that often around the Zen centers in Zen. We don't talk about love so much. But arguably, the fundamental teaching of Buddhism is love. It's love because the fundamental teaching of Buddhism is emptiness. And in a way, love and emptiness are the same thing. That might sound strange to say, but if you think about it, the teaching of emptiness is that nothing, including ourselves, has any fixed, independent, intrinsic nature, that everything, including ourselves, is in total interrelationship, intimate interrelationship with everything and everyone else all the time. The relationship may be subtle, it may be indirect, but there is an intimate interrelationship with everyone and everything throughout time and space, including in the fraught and polarized situation in which we're living today. So these are things for us to reflect on. And I'm going to leave you with the words of Reverend King about love and about emptiness. His famous words are, "All I'm saying is simply this, that all mankind is tied together. All life is interrelated, and we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of identity." This is not a notion of love that's erotic or sentimental. It's a very lofty notion of love, which is based on selflessness, like the teaching of emptiness. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be until I am what I ought to be. This is the interrelated structure of reality. Thank you all.